Some of you aren't just tired as parents. You're actually carrying something heavier than that. Guilt. Think about it. There's guilt about how you've responded, guilt about what you've said, guilt about moments you wish you could take back, right? There's also guilt about not always being the parent you thought you'd be. And the hard part is you don't talk about it. You actually carry that shit quietly. But have you ever asked yourself, why do you carry it quietly? But that's because guilt makes us afraid of what the feeling might mean about us. We worry. If I say this out loud, what does that say about me? Or what if other parents don't feel this? Or what if I'm really messing this up? So instead of bringing guilt into the light, we are internalizing it, dear parent. And when emotions stay internalized, they get heavier. And over time, it starts to change how you see yourself. Dear parent, let's talk about what guilt is really doing to you. Okay? Let's be honest for a moment, okay, as I kind of reflect about guilt. So if you care deeply about your child, you are going to feel guilt at some point. It's very natural. And that's because you're invested. You're trying. And that's because parenting actually matters to you. And so guilt doesn't show up because you don't care. I always have to push back on that notion for parents who struggle with this. It's actually showing up because you do care. But many parents confuse guilt with failure, right? They tend to think if I feel guilty, that must mean I'm doing something wrong. When in reality, though, guilt is often evidence that your values are active. So it means you care how your child experiences you. You care about the impact of your actions. You actually care about aligning with the kind of parent that you actually want to be. Because you see, a parent who truly didn't care, they wouldn't reflect this deeply. They wouldn't question themselves this much, right? Man, they wouldn't even feel emotional tension after difficult moments. So let's clear something up today. The presence of guilt is actually not the proof that you don't care. In many cases, guys, it's proof that you care deeply. And you see, that is why guilt can be so powerful in parenting. Because guilt does not just say, you made a mistake. Guilt will whisper, maybe you are the mistake. That is why it hits differently. You see, anger may flare up, but it passes. Frustration may rise and it settles. Exhaustion may come with the end of a long day, but that guilt stays. You see, guilt follows you after the moment is over. It shows up when your child is asleep. It shows up when the house is quiet. It shows up when you replay what you said over and over. And because you do love your child, guilt attaches itself to your deepest fear. What if I'm hurting them? What if I'm becoming the kind of parent I never wanted to be? What if they remember this? You see, that's what guilt can feel heavy. Not because you're weak, not because you are failing, but because your love has nowhere to go in that moment except inward. And that's how guilt works. But be careful with those guilty thoughts, though. Don't just pass through when you're guilty. I need you to sit with that, because guilt tends to stick. Because human beings are meaning-making creatures. I've said that many times. And so when something emotional happens, our brain tries to interpret it, right? And so it will ask things like, what does this mean? What does this say about me? Right? We go inward. Is this important? Or should I remember this so I don't repeat it? Very common thought. And the emotionally painful moments naturally hold more weight in our memory. And you may be asking why. So the brain is designed to protect relationships and avoid future pain. So when parenting moments feel emotionally significant, your brain's going to hold on to them. Not because you're weak, but it's because you're human. That's what the human brain does. So think about it. When parenting moments feel emotionally significant, your brain holds on to them. Okay? And it's not because you're weak. I have to say that again, because like that really gets people messed up. You see, your brain is constantly going to be asking one question. What do I need to remember from this moment to protect the people that I love? And so when a parenting moment is actually filled with fear, guilt, shame, there's regret, your brain doesn't treat it like an ordinary memory, right? So what it does is like, it'll give it priority. It'll replay it. It'll store it. It keeps bringing it back because deep down it believes it's helping you avoid making the same mistake again. That's how that works. So the problem is that your brain doesn't always know the difference between learning from a moment and living inside of it. So here's something. Instead of remembering the lesson, you relive the pain, right? Again and again and again. And if you think about it, dear parent, that is why some of you can remember something you said to your child 6 months ago, probably a year ago. Heck, depending on the child's age, maybe even 5 years ago, as if it happened this morning, right? And it's not because you're broken, though. And it's not because you're an awful parent, but because emotionally significant moments leave deeper footprints in our brains. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's deeper footprints. And once you understand that, something does begin to change. Okay. You stop treating every guilty memory as evidence against you. So instead, you begin to see it for what it really is. I think it's a loving brain desperately trying to help you become a better parent, even if it has chosen a painful way to do it. Really want you to kind of think about that reframe. But let's break this down. When guilt isn't processed, everyone really needs to pay attention here. It doesn't help to stay. When it stays, it prevents you from processing the guilt. So processing an emotion means allowing yourself to understand the emotion instead of just reacting to it. That happens to us as human beings. I see it in therapy all the time. So it means when you have a feeling, it's important to name it, explore it, understand where it came from, and also decide what to do with it. Instead, don't suppress, don't avoid, and don't replay it endlessly. Because you see, processing says, let me understand what this feeling is trying to tell me. Because emotions that aren't processed, folks, they tend to stay active, actually. I'm going to go a step further. Toxic guilt. Instead of, I made a mistake with parenting, I see a lot, it ends up becoming like, I am the mistake. And so you see how now the focus is shifting from the actual behavior to identity. And folks, identity matters because identity is how you fundamentally see yourself. That's how it's problematic, right? So instead of, I had a hard moment, it ends up becoming, I'm a bad parent. And you see that toxic guilt attaches itself to your identity. And unfortunately, every future parenting moment gets filtered through that lens. That's what makes toxic guilt very dangerous. And so when toxic guilt becomes an identity, folks, it's not going to help you grow. It's actually going to keep you stuck because you're no longer responding to what happened anymore. If you think about it, you're still reacting to how you feel about yourself. And let's be more specific about the 4 things that guilt starts to do to you when it's not processed. First, you're going to overcompensate. So what that looks like is you're going to become too lenient with your kid. You may be afraid to set boundaries with them. You may be trying to make up for the moment. But the problem with overcompensating is this, though. Dear parent, guilt starts parenting your child instead of wisdom. And children still need structure, boundaries. They need stability. Yes, even after difficult moments. I know it's hard. Second, you actually become hyper aware. So this is where I've seen people, they just start second guessing everything. Was that too much? Did I handle that wrong? Am I messing them up? And while reflecting is healthy, I mean, those are reflective thoughts, hypervigilance is actually exhausting. Because now you're parenting under this constant self-surveillance, and eventually you end up you're not trusting yourself anymore. The other thing that happens is that parents emotionally withdraw with guilt because it feels easier to pull back than risk getting it wrong again. And that's very common. But what I notice is that emotional withdrawal actually creates distance. And that distance is going to block your ability to do critical things like repair, connecting with your kid again, even being emotionally present. And those are the very things that guilt was trying to protect. Also, people carry shame. And this is the deepest layer, dear parent, because that thought of, what if I'm not the parent they need? And yes, guilt and shame are connected. You see how that worked? But they're not the same thing, though. You see, guilt will say something like, I did something wrong. But shame says something is wrong with me. And the reason why we break this down is because shame is dangerous because it immediately attacks your identity. You see, it ends up convincing you that your worst moments actually define you. But here's a great reframe I want to share. Guilt is not meant to be something you carry. It's meant to be something you move through. It has a purpose. Think about it. It brings awareness. It actually would invite you to repair with your child. It guides you through growth. But once that stuff is done, it's supposed to go, folks. Guilt is not supposed to just be staying with you. And this is the part that matters the most that a lot of folks don't know. You have to release the guilt. Don't ignore it. Don't ignore guilt, because that's not the same as healing from your guilt. You see, when you ignore guilt, it does not disappear. It usually goes underground. I say that all the time. It becomes tension in your body, irritability in your parenting, defensiveness when your child reacts, or shame that quietly tells you you're a bad parent. You see, ignore guilt often turns into overcorrection too. So you may become overly permissive, apologetic, or emotionally avoidant because you're trying to escape that feeling instead of just understanding that guilt. And that is why we do not ignore guilt. We need to listen to it. We need to learn from it. We need to repair when needed. And again, we have to release that guilt. And so how do you know when you've released guilt? Not because you never think about the moment again, but because the moment no longer defines how you see yourself. See, the way it'll work is you can remember it without becoming trapped inside of it. See, you can learn from it without emotionally punishing yourself every time it comes up. Folks, that's release. That's actually how release looks like. Okay? So let me give you something most parents have never been told. So you don't have to punish yourself to prove you care. Okay? You don't have to sit in it longer. You don't have to replay it over and over. Carry it into the next moment. Don't do that. That doesn't make you more responsible as a parent at all. In fact, folks, it just makes you more exhausted. Why, you say? Well, think about guilt. Guilt consumes emotional energy, right? Think about the last time you were guilty. And when your mind is constantly replaying all of these past moments, these past mistakes, the past fears, my Lord, it just leaves you with less emotional capacity for the present moment. So instead of being emotionally available to your kids, to your partner, to whoever, folks, you're just becoming emotionally drained. Okay? So if you've been carrying guilt, okay, from the moments that didn't go how you wanted to, or from the reactions you wish you could redo this morning, or what about those parts of yourself that you're still learning how to understand? Just take a breath, okay? Because you're not meant to carry that forever. You're meant to learn from it and move forward, okay? It doesn't have to sit with you. Release it and move forward. And before you go, if you've been carrying guilt as a parent, I want you to be honest. Drop it in the comments, please. What's something you've been holding on to that you haven't let go of yet? Talk to us. Please like this video so another parent carrying the same weight, they can find this. And subscribe to Dear Parent, because this is where we're going to keep having these conversations. And turn on your notifications, because the next message, it might help you finally put something down you've been carrying for too long. Dear parent, you don't become better by holding on to your worst moments. You actually become better by learning from them and then letting them go. I'll see you in the next message.